This is National 4, National 5 Chemistry, Unit 1, and the topic is acids and alkalis. Today's lesson is going to look at naming salts formed by neutralization reactions. So it follows on very nicely from the previous lesson where we looked at the three neutralization reactions. Our learning intentions are continuing from last lesson to state the general reactions for acids reacting with metal oxides, metal hydroxides, and metal carbonates. Then we want to look at the names of common acids and a look at the ions that they produce. And finally, we will look at the names of salts that are produced during neutralization reactions. In terms of success criteria, we would want you to be able to write the general equations for neutralization reactions, write the chemical formula for nitric acid, sulfuric acid, and hydrochloric acid, and be able to name the salts produced in neutralization reactions. That sulfuric acid produces sulfate salts, hydrochloric acid produces chloride salts, and nitric acid produces nitrate salts. So this is a recap from last time, and we know that the products of neutralization reaction are always a salt and water. Metal oxide reacting with an acid produces salt and water. Metal hydroxide plus acid produces salt and water. Metal carbonate plus acid produces salt and water, but it also produces carbon dioxide. And we know if a reaction is producing carbon dioxide, we will see bubbles, and we can test that gas and to confirm that it is carbon dioxide by bubbling it through lime water, and the lime water will turn cloudy. So of these three reactions, which of them do you think would be the easiest to study the rate of and why? Well, hopefully you chose metal carbonate because remember, whenever we are following or trying to measure the rate of reaction, we're looking for a change in quantity over time. And with the metal carbonate reaction, we could measure the volume of gas being produced over time, or we could measure how much mass is lost from the reaction, because as that carbon dioxide is produced, it would leave the reaction flask and cause everything to get lighter. With the metal oxide and metal hydroxide, there are not such obvious signs for the chemical reaction that we would be able to follow easily. So now we've got some fill in the blank exercises. Can you remember what goes in each one? So metal something plus acid goes to salt and water. That one we're looking for metal oxide. Now we're missing a word in the second one. Metal hydroxide plus acid goes to what plus water? Well, that is salt. Now we're missing a few words from the final one. So what will go in there? Well, it's going to be a metal carbonate plus acid goes to salt, water, and carbon dioxide. Now this is a list of the common acids. I've included 4. For National 5, you only need to know the top 3. So you need to know hydrochloric acid, you need to know nitric acid, and you need to know sulfuric acid. So when it comes to hydrochloric acid, its chemical formula is HCl. When hydrochloric acid is added to water, it breaks apart to form ions, and it forms hydrogen plus ions and chloride minus ions. Now the hydrogen ion is what makes it an acid in solution, and whenever hydrochloric acid reacts, the salt that is produced, part of the name will include the word chloride. So hydrochloric acid will produce salts where the second part of the name of the salt is something chloride. Nitric acid is our next row. Nitric acid has the chemical formula HNO3. When it dissolves in water, you get a hydrogen ion, which is what makes it an acid, and you also get the NO3 minus ion. Now that ion is called a nitrate ion, and this means that whenever nitric acid reacts with a base or an alkali and produces a salt, part of the name of that salt will include the word nitrate. So the salts that are produced from nitric acid will be a something nitrate. Moving down to our next row, we have sulfuric acid. Now sulfuric acid is a little bit different. It has two hydrogens at the start of the formula, so it is H2SO4. This means that when it dissolves in water, it produces two hydrogen plus ions and it produces a sulfate ion. And the sulfate ion has a 2 minus charge. Now sulfuric acid, whenever it does a neutralization reaction with an alkali or a base, the salt that is produced, part of the name of the salt will be sulfate. So sulfuric acid reacts with bases to form something sulfate. And finally, we've got phosphoric acid, which we don't need to worry about its formula, but phosphoric acid, the salts that it produces are called phosphates. So when phosphoric acid reacts, it will produce something phosphate. That's the name of the salt. So in a bit more detail, we're going for hydrochloric acid. So hydrochloric acid, which has the formula HCl, it forms chloride. So a metal oxide plus hydrochloric acid will produce a metal chloride plus water. A metal hydroxide plus hydrochloric acid produces a metal chloride plus water. And finally, a metal carbonate plus hydrochloric acid produces a metal chloride plus water plus carbon dioxide. So the metal could be any metal. So for example, iron oxide plus hydrochloric acid would give iron chloride plus water. Aluminium hydroxide plus hydrochloric acid would give aluminium chloride plus water. And finally, if we had sodium carbonate plus hydrochloric acid, that would produce sodium chloride plus water plus carbon dioxide. The metal chloride, whether that's iron chloride, potassium chloride, iron chloride, sodium chloride, calcium chloride, that is the salt part. So we've got a question. What is the salt produced when hydrochloric acid reacts with potassium carbonate? What is the salt produced? What is the name of the salt produced when hydrochloric acid reacts with potassium carbonate? Well, that one is potassium chloride. Potassium is the metal from the metal carbonate, and hydrochloric acid produces chlorides. So when they react together, we get potassium chloride, and our other products would be water and carbon dioxide. Now nitric acid. Nitric acid, which has the formula HNO3, it forms nitrates. So a metal oxide plus nitric acid produces a metal nitrate plus water. A metal hydroxide plus nitric acid produces a metal nitrate plus water. And a metal carbonate plus nitric acid produces a metal nitrate plus water plus carbon dioxide. So for example, sodium oxide plus nitric acid would produce sodium nitrate plus water. Potassium hydroxide plus nitric acid would give us potassium nitrate plus water. And tin carbonate plus nitric acid would give tin nitrate plus water plus carbon dioxide. So the question we've got asked here is, name the salt produced when nitric acid reacts with copper oxide. The name of that salt is going to be a metal nitrate, and the metal is copper, so it's copper nitrate. Finally, we've got sulfuric acid. Now sulfuric acid forms sulfates. So a metal oxide plus sulfuric acid gives a metal sulfate plus water. A metal hydroxide plus sulfuric acid gives a metal sulfate plus water. And a metal carbonate plus sulfuric acid gives a metal sulfate, water, and carbon dioxide. So if we had gold oxide reacting with sulfuric acid, we would produce gold sulfate. If we had platinum hydroxide reacting with sulfuric acid, we would produce platinum sulfate plus water. And if we had magnesium carbonate reacting with sulfuric acid, we would produce magnesium sulfate plus water plus carbon dioxide. Your question, name the salt produced when sulfuric acid reacts with calcium hydroxide. So the name of that salt is calcium sulfate. Now we have phosphoric acid. Now phosphoric acid, it follows the exact same pattern, except what's formed in each reaction is a metal phosphate. And your question is, what is the name of the salt produced when phosphoric acid reacts with sodium hydroxide? So that one is going to be sodium phosphate. So hopefully now you can write the general equations for neutralization reactions. You'd be able to write the chemical formula of nitric acid, HNO3, sulfuric acid, H2SO4, and hydrochloric acid, HCl. You can also name the salts produced from neutralization reactions, remembering that sulfuric acid produces salts that have sulfate in the name, hydrochloric acid produces salts with chloride in the name, and nitric acid produces salts with nitrate in the name. So that has been naming salts, and that concludes the lesson for today. I will see you next time where we learn more about acids and alkalis.